All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be a part of our webinar series titled Navigating the Hierarchy of Food Recovery. This is the second webinar of our series, and today we're going to be focusing on food recovery. So the Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation's Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices invite you to join us for the rest of this webinar series. We have two more parts coming up in February and March, where we will be focusing on different management strategies that are laid out by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's food recovery hierarchy. This webinar is being put on by TDEC in collaboration with the Society of St. Andrew of Tennessee, the Food Donation Connection, and Postmates. My name is Ashley Cabrera, and I am a Creative Services Coordinator and the Get Food Smart TN Program Lead with the Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices at TDEC. I will be hosting the webinar today for our wonderful speakers. Just a few housekeeping. Everyone is muted upon entry to reduce the amount of background noise, but if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and I will work on getting those answered throughout the webinar. Just so everyone sees, on the bottom right hand, you'll see chat, and I'm going to send a message in there just saying hi so everyone can see where that is. Feel free to send your questions through the chat to everyone, or if you're more comfortable, you can send it to just me by choosing to send to just the host. You can also raise your hand clicking the little hand emoji that's also on the right side of your screen, and I will unmute attendees as you raise your hand and allow for discussion throughout the webinar. So to give a little overview of our webinar today, we'll be focusing on food waste through food recovery, specifically the logistics and processes involved in donating food. We will also highlight food recovery efforts of various organizations and the challenges that they have faced along the way. We will be joined by Jeannie Hunter with Society of St. Andrew in Tennessee, Jim Larson with Food Donation Connection, and Renee Barker with Postmates. I'm so excited to have all of them here, and they all have a wealth of knowledge and experience that will help us better understand the challenges and solutions to food recovery. Now, before we get started with our wonderful speakers, I wanted to give everyone a quick overview of Get Food Smart TN. We formally launched in April 2018, and the program has three components. There is education, outreach, recognition, and technical assistance. Outside of these functions, we also work in the food waste space regarding legislation and also partnerships and granting programs. Now, since we are going to be talking about food recovery today and food donation, I wanted to give everyone just a little Food Donation Liability 101 and an update. If you don't know about the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act, I'm sure our speakers will discuss this today, but it provides a strong federal baseline of liability protections for food donors, and it covers individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and then other businesses and nonprofit organizations and gleaners. In addition, during the 111th General Assembly, TDEC worked with Tennessee legislators to expand the food donation liability protections in Tennessee. So through this legislation, we expanded it in three different ways. So we made it to where it aligns with state donor liability protections with the federal standards of gross negligence by broadening Tennessee's liability protection statute to explicitly allow for protection for donation of past state foods, and also to provide liability protection to food businesses and donating directly to the individual. The updated donor liability protections can be found in TCA 5313-101 through 103. In the follow-up email that I'll send along with the recording, I will send this information if you want to look further into that. So this is a really big deal, especially since one of the top barriers that were identified by the National Restaurant Association is that donating food is one of the top barriers is liability concerns. And actually 50% of food manufacturers identified this as a concern. And also retail and food service and grocery had about a 25% concern, which was actually down from 54% in the previous study. So it is improving, but there's still barriers to it. So we're hoping through not only the federal law, but also the expanded protections through Tennessee laws that we can increase the amount of donations and increase food recovery. So enough about me and my part. I want to introduce our first speaker, which will be Jeannie Hunter. She is the Tennessee Regional Director of the Society of St. Andrew in Tennessee, and it is a nonprofit which gleans excess food and donating it to feeding agencies. She's a graduate of Eckerd College and Emory University and has worked in colleges, churches, and nonprofits, and she is mom to a 9-year-old girl named Esther. So I'm going to give presenter capabilities over to Jeannie and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Wow. Do you hear that too? Okay.
You're fine.
Okay, good. I'm going to talk about gleaning today, especially in the field. As Ashley said, I'm Jeannie Hunter, and I'm the Regional Director for the Society of St. Andrew. The Society of St. Andrew was founded 41 years ago now in Virginia when two pastors decided they were going to start a farm, and that's how they were going to end hunger. They very quickly found out that farming was a little more difficult than all that, and they also found out from their fellow farmers how much was being left behind in the field. And so that is how we got started. This is from ReFed, a food waste prevention organization, and it shows that, you know, most food waste happens at the consumer-facing businesses or in homes. But there is a good chunk of it that happens here at farms, a good chunk of food that's wasted. So this practice of gleaning is from 3000 BCE probably, really from when we first started becoming agricultural people as opposed to nomadic. And it was an issue of justice, making sure that hungry people could get food. And what they would do is they would leave, sometimes they would leave the outer edges of a field and not harvest it so that people who are hungry could harvest it. Sometimes they would just not pick up what they dropped. Sometimes they would leave things in the trees or on the vine if they're grapes. And that was there as a way to make sure that everybody had enough to eat. Contemporary gleaning sometimes looks almost exactly the same. This is a youth group that went to, I think this is Green Door Gourmet, and they picked kale. So you can see that they harvested that kale, and they did a good job. So we get volunteers that come out to farms, and they will pick whatever it is that the farmer has given us permission or asked us to glean for that day. We'll have volunteers from churches and schools and workplaces, colleges, and it's a good activity. It's fun. It's nice to get your hands dirty. It's especially neat for kids to see where their food comes from. Another way that contemporary gleaning happens is, this is Matt West, and he has a farm down near Taft, Tennessee, and when they harvest their sweet potatoes, they go through this machine that sorts out the sizes, and then they look at them all and make sure they're pretty, and then the ones that aren't good enough because they're a weird shape or a size or they have spots or something like that, he could sell to people that are going to can them, or he can donate them. to us, and he chooses to donate them to us, so we're glad for that. And we take those, quote, ugly sweet potatoes and donate them to agencies that feed hungry people. The green beans are a similar story. They get harvested by a machine in the field, and then there's this giant warehouse-sized contraption that sorts them, sorts out the broken ones and the too curly ones and the too long ones and the too short ones. And they get sent off a conveyor belt. And typically that conveyor belt goes straight out of the building into a dump truck. And then the dump truck takes those green beans, the broken and spotted ones, to the dump. But they collect them for us, and we're able to take them and donate them to feed hungry people. They can be discriminated against, vegetables, fruits, for their shape, their size, even curvature of a banana, what color they are, if they have a spot, what time of year it is. One year it was so warm, so late into the fall, that people weren't buying sweet potatoes because it's a cool weather kind of thing that you want to eat. And so a couple of our farmers just had so much extra sweet potatoes that we ended up with a lot of excess for that. And then stock levels. If a grocery store has all the peppers and nobody is buying the peppers, they don't need another truckload of peppers, and they'll call it to do something with those peppers. So another version of contemporary gleaning is those truckloads, like I said. General Mills down in Murfreesboro makes yogurt, all the different kinds of yogurts, and they also make crescent rolls and biscuits and stuff like that. And this year especially, because people haven't been buying novelty foods or treat foods as much as they're buying the staple, they've had a lot of excess. And so from just big truckloads from them and from other places, we've already done, well, we placed 4 more truckloads this week, and they're 40,000 pounds each. So this is probably more like 900,000 pounds just from keeping truckloads from being dumped into landfills. And we take them to the bigger food banks, whereas the other farms and processing plants usually end up at smaller places. Another version of contemporary gleaning, now this is pre-COVID, kids don't eat their whole lunch, and so we help schools set up a share table in the cafeteria, and with the share table, either other kids can eat the food or take the food home with them or whatever if they need it, but then any excess that is still left over at the end of the lunch period, we collect and donate that to the local agency. And like I said, it's on pause because of the pandemic and the way they're packaging the lunches and all of that stuff is a whole thing, but hopefully we'll be doing that soon-ish. We'll see. Of course, we're talking about the food recovery hierarchy, and this is where we are. We're number 2, feeding the hungry people. And so if you look at hunger rates, this is 2018 that this was put out. These are the rates of food hardship for the U.S. And then this is by regions. And the light blue line at the very top, except for that one little section, is the Southeast. So that includes us. Tennessee has that high rate of hunger and food insecurity. You can see here it's about 16.8% in households with children. It was 19%. We were number 13 in the most recent statistics that I read. And of course, COVID has just about doubled all of these numbers. Last year, we gleaned 1 million pounds. We engaged 1,800 volunteers. We had 164 people give food to us, or companies give food to us, and we were able to give to 112 receiving agencies. This year so far, we've done over 2 million pounds. That's partly because of COVID, and I'll get into that a little bit more. We've engaged 1,500 volunteers. 99 providers have given us food. and we've been able to donate food to 115 receiving agencies. So COVID-19 has affected us. Early on, it was hard to tell what was going to happen, but when the restaurants closed, one of the very first things that happened was we had an egg farmer in Knoxville who called us and said, the restaurant that I give my eggs to, and I'm assuming it's a breakfast place because it was a lot of eggs, the restaurant that I give my eggs to is closed. I don't know what to do with these eggs right now. And so he donated them to Society of St. Andrew, and they were able to be placed at different agencies that feed hungry people, and that was a really good treat. Since then, a lot of the farmers haven't been able to sell the foods that they grow, and so the USDA stepped in and created this program, the USDA Farms to Families food boxes, and they're paying the farmers, and then the food is going directly to feeding agencies. So it's kind of a win-win in that people are getting fed and farmers are still getting paid for their work. And so as of November 30th, the end of last month, we had 2 million pounds, and you can see 840,000 pounds of that was from the USDA boxes. So I said we doubled up from last year. This is November, but a big chunk of it is that USDA program. We're still doing a lot better with our own gleaning as well, but unfortunately that's because a lot of people aren't able to buy food. That should say 98, I think, not 948 agencies from Knoxville to Memphis receive food, and they are large and small. We get to know a lot of the smaller food pantries and little church-based food pantries and try and diversify where we send things. We also try to keep it the shortest food mile. So if it's at a farm near Knoxville, we want it to go to an agency near Knoxville. If it's a farm in Middle Tennessee, we try and get it somewhere in Middle Tennessee. We can't always make that work, so sometimes we will send a load of yogurt to Memphis or whatever it is, but we try our best. So an estimated 3 servings a pound and 4 servings in a meal, if you look at our 2 million pounds number, that ends up being quite a lot of food when you think about it in that way. So we think that this work helps hungry people because it gives them good food. It gives them often fresh fruits and vegetables instead of maybe day-old pastries. It helps the agencies because when we give them food, their budget is a little bit freed up to do something else, either buying more food or providing other services. It helps the farmers. Some of them, it helps them clean out their fields. We have the one pepper farmer, the load was getting too heavy on the plants before the CSA, before the day of the CSA pickup. And so he asked us to come just pick the big ones off the top so that the plants would be able to stand up again and they could get all the other ones in a couple of days when they grew bigger. So we picked all the heavy ones, and that was good. And that was good for him because his plants didn't get overweighed? They weren't too heavy and didn't break. Volunteers, like I said about the kids learning what's going on out there, it's really nice to be out there in the sun, and it's really nice to be thinking about this abstract problem of hunger and to actually be able to do something where you're using your hands and you're doing a tangible task to relieve it. And of course, I assume that we all know that this helps the planet because if we're putting all this food into landfills, especially the truckloads, the green beans or the yogurts or any of the truckloads that we rescue, other food might just end up plowed under. But if we can keep something out of a landfill, then we are helping the planet as well. Some of our challenges are distances. I talked about trying to keep the shortest food mile. Different food pantries have different storage abilities. Some of them only have shelving, and so they can maybe get sweet potatoes, but they probably can't get strawberries unless they're going to go out that day. Some of them have more refrigeration, some of them just have freezing, and so our program coordinator, Kelsey, keeps track of all that and help make sure that it's going to the places that it's going to be able to use it, as opposed to somebody else that's going to have to end up throwing it in the trash anyway. Of course, crops are inconsistent because, you know, weather, climate, is all variable, and so we can't tell an agency, we will bring you 20 pounds of lettuce every week. We call them and say, hey, we have some lettuce this week, can you take it? So that can be a challenge, and sometimes farmers just disappear off the planet, and we don't know what happened to them. So that is kind of an inconsistency as well. Outreach, we wish more people knew about us. We have a pretty good word of mouth network at this point, but we would love it to be even bigger. And then, as Ashley was saying before, the farmers are fearful of being sued or some kind of liability, whether it's the food or the people being on the farm, whatever it is. And we have enough insurance and protections for the farm part of things. And then, of course, as Ashley mentioned, there's the food law that keeps people from being sued for food donations. But if they knew more about that, that would be great. Some of these recovery-related solutions, they're from a ReFed document from 2016, and this is the different amount of money or potential that each of these different tests would do. So if we gave people better tax incentives, right now usually it's a deduction, but if it were a credit, that would be really helpful. If we had some kind of standardized regulation, that would be helpful. Donation matching software, so I think we'll hear more a little bit later about that, but that would be a good way to reduce some of this waste. And then transportation, storage and handling, and that liability education would be important too. So those are some of the ways that they're talking about reducing waste. And again, as far as policy, the tax deductions that I mentioned exist, but it would be great if they were credits. There's the Good Samaritan Act that keeps people from being sued for food donations. The possibility of a penalty for when people just throw stuff away is an option. And then, of course, compost services for state and local municipalities. Ways that you could help: volunteer with us, follow us on social media, and like everything, and repost everything, and you can donate to us, whether that's crops or financial, and that's my contact information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And if you think of one later on, I can also bring those back up to Jeannie. But yes, thank you so much. If you have never volunteered with Society of St. Andrew, it is really great, like she said, to just visualize and see, actually to see the amount of excess food that is left in fields and the impact that it makes. It's really great. So I really encourage you, if you have time, whether it's yourself or with a group, to contact them and find a way to help out. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jim Larson. He leads program development for Food Donation Connection. Since joining Food Donation Connection in 1998, Jim has been instrumental in the growth of their Harvest program, which coordinates donations of prepared perishable food to local nonprofit organizations nationwide. He implemented harvest programs for Yum! Brands, Darden Restaurants, Papa John's International, Chipotle Mexican Grill, Starbucks, McDonald's, and others. Since 2003, he has provided feedback to many members of the U.S. Congress to encourage the donations of surplus prepared food by improving food donation tax laws. Permanent tax incentives for small businesses were signed into law on December 18, 2015. He has been quoted supporting recent legislation. The Preserving Charitable Incentives Act is intended to increase food donations during this difficult time of COVID-19. So with that, Jim, I'm going to give you presenter capabilities and take it away.
Sounds good. Good afternoon, everyone. First off, Jeannie, great presentation. I really appreciate getting an update on SOSA. FTC works with Society of St. Andrews at times as well, and I'll mention that in a couple minutes. But I wanted to share a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, a little bit about who is Food Donation Connection, our history, our role, our vision, our mission, some of the process that goes through food donations, particularly in the case of prepared food donations, and also talk about the benefits, and then we'll wrap up with some of the challenges we've had in 2020. And we do call it surplus food. That's one term. We just have tried to stay away from the term waste. So you'll be hearing me refer to it as surplus food. In this particular presentation, we're going to talk primarily about prepared food donations. That's cooked food primarily from restaurants that gets donated to help people in need. We like to say that it is a socially responsible and a simple alternative to throwing away surplus food. So first off, I want to share a little bit about who Food Donation Connection is. We're based in Knoxville, but we work all across the U.S. and now actually about 30 other countries. We have a phrase we say we follow our donors. So as we work with companies that donate food and we work with global companies, we've ended up helping them in about 30 other countries as well as the United States. We coordinate the distribution of surplus food, so we're not actually the end user or the food bank or the shelter. We're not the group that picks up the food, but we primarily work with groups that have food so they can get it to people in need. Yeah, we link with local nonprofits, so that's key. In fact, it was alluded to a little bit earlier, trying to keep it close to home. We link the donor restaurants with a local nonprofit so the food stays nearby and impacts the community in which they operate. We have a live answer call center, so if there's any issues with the charity or the restaurant or have any questions about food safety or a number of things, you'll call our support center and have the issues resolved right then. And we track donations for a lot of reasons. We have an e-log mobile app and desktop, but we also can get donations from our donors through file transfer protocols and a whole number of different things. We do that so that we can report to the donor what they've donated for sustainability or operations improvement or the tax benefits that was mentioned earlier. And there's also recall tracking assistance. So if there's ever an issue at a restaurant, even if it doesn't involve the donated food, out of abundance of caution, we have the charities, we know who received the food and we have them find the food and either destroy it or take it back to the restaurant. So that's a lot of the features and things that FTC does. What motivates us is our vision and our mission. So we are technically not a nonprofit, but we want to help those folks with surplus food. And our vision comes from feeding of the 5,000. You're probably familiar with that from the Bible where Jesus fed 5,000 people. Afterwards, they gathered up 12 baskets of food. There was some reason there was surplus. And he said, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So that's just our byline. In fact, if you look at our logo, it says Food Donation Connection, let nothing be wasted. And our mission really is to expand our network of available sources. That's key, that we're not trying to create food to donate, but it's available source of surplus to those in need. And then we want to grow our company basically to carry out that vision. We've already looked a little bit at the food waste recovery hierarchy. I want to talk about where we fit in that because our model fits quite well. Certainly we are in the second tier of feeding people, but what happens is when our donors see the surplus food set aside in the freezer or they see the reports and information we provide them, they realize there may be a better way, and they do end up doing a significant amount of source reduction. They figure out there's a better way to prepare an item or prepare less. So that's a good thing, that we really are affecting the top 2 parts of the food waste recovery hierarchy. Often we wonder why donate food. Well, some of these are pretty obvious. Employee pride is the first one I put down here. I mean, I've never met a person in a restaurant that likes to create food and then likes to throw it away. So they really, really enjoy working for a company that takes the time and puts an emphasis on donating surplus food. Certainly, that's less waste reduction, less food to landfills, less greenhouse gases. In fact, a number of states have put in organics ban, like California and other states, so it fits right in with that. The improvement to operations is great because it helps, as I mentioned a minute ago, reduce waste at the source. And because we set them up with local charities, they are impacting the community in which they operate. So these restaurants and operators are generally live in the community and want to help people in the community. And the tax benefits, I'll get into a little more detail, but there's a bottom line benefit, and we'll look at an example in a few slides. Also was mentioned the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act. It's legal liability protection, signed in 1996, and as was mentioned, it provides liability protection except in cases of gross negligence or intentional misconduct. If you really try to hurt somebody or mess up pretty big time, then it may not cover you, but it's really never been tested. It's done for good faith donations, and over the last, 30 or so years, it's really not had a problem. Bill Emerson, by the way, was a congressman in southeast Missouri. He died in 1996 of lung cancer. His wife, Joanne Emerson, took that seat afterwards, and she also was a big advocate for food donations. So Bill was real pro food donations up until the point he died. He died before the legislation was enacted, so they named it after Bill. So that's a good thing. Just a snapshot of a few of the logos that we work with, just a handful. And there's a story behind every one of these, a really good story. And we started with Pizza Hut back in 1992. In fact, our founder came out of Pizza Hut and saw there was a lot of surplus food. In fact, a lot of personal pan pizzas being tossed every 20 minutes, and thought, you know, well, let's do better with this. So he started Food Donation Connection, and we began with what's called the Pizza Hut Harvest Program. And then via word of mouth, it went to KFC, their sister company, and then all kinds of other companies have come on over the last 28 years. What we might take a look at is see what steps are involved. You know, food safety is the first thing we think about. It certainly would not be a good thing to donate surplus food and hurt people. So we focus on food safety, and that's the first thing we build is the process that goes into this. In fact, everybody at Food Donation Connection, we're about 30 or 35 employees, and we have technology people in the call center and accounting and all kinds of things. And a lot of people don't ever go into the restaurant, but we want to make sure everybody has an appreciation for food safety. So everyone in the company is ServSafe certified, trained, so they can speak to the important issue of food safety. The second thing we want to do is work with each donor to identify a specific list of items that are specific to their restaurant that they can donate. So there's a list of potential items. Then we're going to select the qualified charities. What we do is we put every donor location in our system and assign it a latitude, longitude. Therefore, we can see every donor and every charity that we work with wherever you are in the country, and we can put a search radius, whether it's 1 mile or 10 miles or whatever, and find out who's nearby. We literally have a button that says find nearby, so we can see what charities and what other restaurants are in the community helping people by donating their surplus food. And then we set up an established schedule. Well, actually, we have the charity talk with the restaurant general manager and determine what day is best for them to come by, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. In fact, our model is one where the charity gets the food for free, provided they're willing to pick it up on a regular basis. If they get to the point where they can't pick it up, that's fine. We'll find another charity based on our geocoding or our latitude, longitude, and find somebody else who can pick it up, and so we can always substitute for them. But generally, it's a one-to-one relationship where that charity is going to the same restaurant, typically on a weekly basis. We track the donations. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and calculate the savings. You know, it might be savings related to greenhouse gases, might be tax savings, it might be operations optimization. So there's a lot of things you can do with the reporting, and we do customized reporting for our donor partners, we call them. It could be tax, could be PR, could be government affairs. I mean, there's a lot of reasons you want to share with your congressman what you're doing in the community. We'll touch on the process for restaurants, and this varies by each restaurant. This is just a couple of example slides. But basically, the food that's been prepared is held hot out of the temperature danger zone until it's decided to be donated. And then it's rapidly cooled through the danger zone, and then packaged and logged and kept in the cooler or freezer until it gets picked up. And then it's tracked via either donation data entry by the store or by the charity, or sometimes, like I mentioned, a file transfer from one system for their inventory system to our systems. And then the process for the charities is one where they pick it up. As I mentioned, they're going to get it for free provided they're willing to pick it up, and then they transport it. So certainly you can put food in a refrigerated truck and transport that, but that takes a lot of space and carbon. We've developed a process for the small amount of food that is donated at restaurants, usually 20, 30, 40 pounds, maybe a pickup. We provide these insulated transport pouches to the charities, and they put that in, and then they can easily hop on a bus, or they can hop on the London Tube. This lady in the picture here with the green pouches is actually in London and likely to get on the London Tube and just take it back to her charity. So we've tried to make it very simple for them by providing those pouches. And then the charities are going to either serve the food or distribute it. The lady in the lower left, Maria, she's in Atlanta, creating a huge kettle of food for lunch. She had a lot of macaroni noodles, and then through the donation of a steakhouse in Atlanta, they got a couple of sheet trays of steak trimmings and added it to that. And the men that came off the street that day for lunch were just amazed at the amount of food or the amount of meat actually that was in the meal that day. And that's something that you and I probably take for granted and wouldn't think anything about tossing it, but it makes a huge difference for the charities that are helping people in need. We also touched on the tax savings piece earlier. Let me walk through an example. The columns are basically what you can do with food. You can sell it, you can throw it away, or you can donate it. And then on the left-hand side, we'll look at the financial implications or the financial parts of this. And as was mentioned, it is a tax deduction. And what's interesting about tax deductions, the value of the deduction is based on the tax rate. Tax rates have gone down in the last couple of years. That may not stay down, but this example uses a tax rate of 21%. But what we'll do is we'll walk through this and say that if you have a $10 item, you have a sales revenue of $10, you might have a cost for a restaurant that's roughly 1/3, so we'll say $3.25. So your initial profit looks like $6.75, but then you're taxed on that at 21%. You get a $1.42 tax. So ultimately, that first column says if you sell it, a $10 item, you're going to make $5.33, and that's great. If you do not donate it, you throw it away, there's no sales revenue, but there's still the tax deductions. So you write off the $3.25. When you apply your 21% tax rate, you get 68 cents off, so you're losing $2.57 when you toss that. Now, if you donate it, what's interesting, you still don't have revenue, but you get a double deduction. As it says up at the top, the U.S. tax code provides an enhanced, or maybe you say incremental deduction, or an extra deduction for donating. And it's the lesser of the profit, half of the profit, or cost a second time. So that's what we're looking at. So on the third column, you get the 3 1/4 twice, and when the $6.50 is applied to the 21% tax rate, you get back $1.37, and you lose, but you only lose $1.88. So the message about this slide is you never create food to donate. You're not going to make money donating it, but you lose less. So that's the tax savings. At tax time, you write a smaller check to the government, and that's the tax savings because it's money that stays in your pocket. FTC has a technology group that developed eBlog Mobile. It's designed so that data can be entered either by the charity or by the donor, or like I mentioned a couple of times, a file transfer type of protocol. The charity picks up the food and they verify what was received. So they'll see on their side of the portal what was entered, and then they'll electronically sign for it. This does allow also for traceability, as I mentioned, out of abundance of caution. Sometimes food is recalled, particularly from grocery stores. If one of the manufacturers has a recall, we're able to find out who received it and get it recalled. And then reporting to the donor, we send operations reports monthly and then the tax reports annually. There's a lot of details they'll need for their tax return each each year, so there's a lot of details that we'll provide them. And they do have some online access to that data as well. Just a recap on the reporting and the reasons we might want to do it, corporate social responsibility, public relations, and I'll even add government relations to that. There's times when some of our large donors will want to know what they've done in a certain community because they might be talking to their congressman or someone else. So we can parse the data by congressional district or county or state or just about any way. It's a lot of big data parsing to report to our donors. A lot of that's for the tax savings or operations optimization, that source reduction or reducing waste. And ultimately, the big one, the environmental impact. There's less food to landfills, and that's a good way to document that to your shareholders that you're doing that. Now, some of the challenges that we faced this year, we'll touch on that. So here are some restaurant donation trends, and it varies quite a bit. The National Restaurant Association said there's about 100,000 restaurants have closed. So that's basically 1 in 6 restaurants. And about 500,000 restaurants are what they call economic free fall. And they went on to say the average revenue, and that's average across all kinds of restaurants, is falling about 36%. So they've really been impacted, with closed dining rooms and that type of thing. And about 90% of restaurants have reported some type of decline. So I've also added what I might call a comment beneath each one of these. The first upper left, I just said, hey, they took their eye off the ball. They weren't really, their focus and their business dropped, and they didn't really, do a lot to donate. The upper right, I said, stayed the course. They did a pretty good job. They were able to continue to donate at that kind of level. The lower left, I said they were still building the program. And in fact, that's the case. That's a donor partner of ours that was in the rollout or building phase, and they just kept at it. And that's, a lot of good to say about that. The lower right is a typical casual dining, a sit-down restaurant, because they, their dining rooms were closed. So not only did their business drop off, but almost paralleled was the food donations that dropped off. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we've seen across the food donation spectrum in 2020. Now, a little bit of silver lining in all this is that the larger distribution center donations or the upstream donations actually increased quite a bit. So this is a slide that shows on the left the DC donations we coordinated in 2019, and there's like, in a given month, there might be 500,000 pounds donated. And then as we got into COVID, and you can see April, May, June, July, had, upwards of 2 million pounds of food in a given month. And most of this is truckloads. In fact, Society of St. Andrew got some of this. I don't know if they did in Tennessee, but in other states where it was donated. And so that is a good thing that it, while the food was stranded and didn't go to the restaurants, it still was put to good use and primarily went to food banks or big, large programs that could really use the food. Just a quick summary, a couple snapshots of what we talked about already. It's a proven process. We have a long history of over 28 years of coordinating surplus food donations, so it works well, and it's really proven. As we mentioned, there is liability protection when it's donated in good faith. That's primarily a U.S. law. There's tax savings available, provided you have a taxable income. It was mentioned by Jeannie that it is a tax deduction, so therefore you do need a taxable income. And certainly it's positive for the environment. It's less to the landfill and less greenhouse gases and all those good things. And ultimately it helps people in the community, and it's free to those who are helping. So we get food to the people on the front line. So this is the people, planet, profits approach. It's really a triple win. With that, we'll probably roll on, or I'll be love to take some of your questions now or at the end of the session.
Thanks, Jim. There actually is one question that came in. So when would a charity have to pay for the donation?
From our perspective, they don't have to pay for it. They get it for free. The only cost is involved is they've got to have someone pick it up. So they may have some, whether it's their own vehicle or a volunteer vehicle, somebody's got to pay for the fuel. Somebody's got to, take their time. So whether it's a paid person or a volunteer, that's maybe a cost they would have, but there's never a charge from Food Donation Connection or never a charge from the donor company to the charity. They get it for free as long as they're willing to pick it up.
Awesome, thank you. If there are any more questions for Jim, feel free to put them in the chat.
What does this say? Do you still donate buffet food, or have you changed? Someone's asked a question about buffets. I think just as the restaurants have gone, buffets have pretty much been shut down. The closest thing you might find to a buffet is, a manned buffet, possibly. If you order, I was in Whole Foods the other day, and their large buffet has been trimmed down quite a bit to items that they have a person standing there serving you. So that's kind of where the buffets have gone, and I believe then as a result, most of the buffet donations, and that's a topic in and of itself for another day, but I'd say buffet donations are pretty much shut down.
Gotcha. All right, are there any other questions that you've seen come in on your end? I don't have any more right here.
I don't see any here.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim, so much. And I was actually just thinking, I think the first time I ever heard about Food Donation Connection was at a conference about 5 years ago. So long relationship with them, great organization.
Yeah, it might have been in Chattanooga. We did a presentation in Chattanooga about that time frame.
Yeah, for
yep.
Sure.
Thanks,
awesome.
Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Renee Barker. She is the Food Systems Sustainability Manager for Postmates. Through her work on the Civic Lab Social Impact Team, she positively connects with neighborhoods through community engagement and innovative technology solutions to combat complex, pervasive issues. Her focus is on food security-related projects across the United States, in addition to partnerships with nonprofits and local governments to leverage the Postmates product for good. She graduated with a BS in Environmental Science, Policy and Management from the University of Minnesota and has made Nashville her home since 2015. And she currently serves on the board of Nashville nonprofit Tennessee Women in Green and Urban Green Lab. So I'm going to give presenter capabilities over to you, Renee, and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Jeannie and Jim. I really enjoyed your presentations, and we're definitely going to have to connect after this because I have so many ideas. Welcome, everyone. As Ashley said, I'm the Food Systems Sustainability Manager for FoodFight, which is our program from Postmates. And first off, I'll share some stats that we have looked at to kind of inform how we operate this program. So first of all, about 40% of all food in the United States is wasted, and a majority of this wasted food ends up in the landfill. About 18 million tons is the estimated food waste generated every year from the hospitality sector, and 94% of this is from restaurants and food service companies. And unfortunately, 1 in 8 U.S. households do not have enough food to eat, and this number may actually be a lot worse due to COVID currently. But fortunately, Postmates covers about 80% of all households in the U.S., and food delivery is our strength as a company. We built FoodFight to address these issues in the communities that we operate in. It is a program from our Civic Labs team, which is our social impact department that Ashley described. And on this team, we focus on 3 main pillars: food system sustainability, community engagement and disaster relief, and advancing diverse-owned businesses. So food security is really one of our top priorities, and it's one of our main pillars that we look at. The FoodFight program helps restaurants reduce waste while helping people in their community. And speaking with our partner restaurants, very similar to what Jim said, we found that so many wanted to do both these things. They want to reduce their waste, they want to donate surplus food, they want to help out in any way they can. From us, our conversations with our partner restaurants, we found that they really needed help with logistics, especially if it's a restaurant who has never donated before. They're not familiar with the process, what's acceptable. As Jeannie and Jim both mentioned, some are afraid of liability concerns. So with FoodFight, we primarily work with our network of restaurants that operate using one of our Postmates tablets. Because these are mostly smaller restaurants, we see smaller donation sizes from a large number of restaurants. So we're collecting a lot of smaller amounts of food, primarily prepared foods. This is a free program for both our partner restaurants to participate in and for the agencies that are receiving the food. So this next set is a short video that just kind of explains how we first got started about 2 years ago.
Yep, and let me get that for you. Awesome.
Yeah, so that's just a quick snapshot of one of our first partners. We started FoodFight 2 years ago in just a few pilot cities to make sure we had a program that works, especially for restaurants and for our partner agencies. And since then, we've expanded to over 700 cities across the country. And we're currently working with about 400 recipient agencies. So how it works is, from the restaurant's perspective, they have a Postmates tablet that they use to address all of their orders, see feedback about their deliveries, and stats about their sales and everything. So when there is a FoodFight recipient agency nearby that's available to receive food, a new button appears on their tablet. And they simply tap that, and then that automatically calls a nearby driver to come pick up the delivery and bring it to a shelter at no charge. This is what it actually looks like on the tablet. So that purple box is what will pop up if there's a place that is able to receive food, and then it'll turn green once they click it and go through all the steps. They do have an option to enter the approximate weight of the food, and then it is automatically routed to the nearest available restaurant. On the Postmates side, on the delivery driver, it looks the same as any other delivery that comes to them. So there's no reason that they wouldn't accept this delivery when they're pinged to see if they're available. Because of the way that this delivery works on the tablet, it's a little bit different than if you or I were ordering from an app. There's no tipping option because we tried to streamline the process and make it really 1 or 2 touches of a button for it to work. So these jobs are delivered or are paid out at a slightly higher delivery rate for the driver. So there's no tipping option, but to account for that, they're paid out a little bit more. And currently, Postmates is funding all of these deliveries. Since 2018, we have donated over 250,000 pounds of food. A little bit about our challenges are we have a more dense network in cities, but obviously there are food insecure people throughout the country in suburbs and in more rural areas as well. So for us, it's a little bit tougher for us to reach those areas because we don't have as dense of a network of drivers. Similar to what Jeannie mentioned with Society of St. Andrew, there is also uncertainty in these donations in that they're not guaranteed on a regular schedule for most cases. So when an agency signs up to be a part of our program and be a recipient, they set the days and hours of the week that they can receive food on a weekly basis. So that informs when the button is available on the restaurant tablet. but it's still up to the restaurant to actually donate and push that button. They have to continue to be available to receive the food, but it doesn't guarantee that donations will be sent. I do see a question came in, how does Postmates raise money for payments to all of the drivers? That is just paid out from Postmates revenue. So we're not raising funds outside of our normal operations. There are a few different things that I wanted to highlight that have especially helped grow the FoodFight program. So these are some examples of community fridges that have popped up in a lot of different cities. Essentially, it's a refrigerator that's outside. Sometimes it's along with a pantry as well. And they're set up by people in the neighborhood. Sometimes it's set up by a nonprofit. Sometimes it's set up by a business who has that electric plug outside to plug in the refrigerator. But the great thing about these is that they are available 24/7 since they're outside. So one of the challenges that we have are the matching up of the hours that a restaurant wants to donate food versus when an agency can receive food. Those don't always line up. We try to work with restaurants and give them the information of, say, this shelter is accepting food in the afternoons on weekdays. Can you accommodate that? Where they might think at first, I want to donate food from my restaurant after hours once I'm done with my normal operations. So sometimes that can be a challenge to find that match, but community fridges are operational 24/7. So for those restaurants that are mapped to these, they see the FoodFight button available all the time on the tablet, and that has made it really, really easy for the restaurants. Another question came in, how do restaurants sign up? That's a great question. So restaurants do not sign up. They are automatically in the program. So if they do not want to participate, they don't want to donate, that's fine. They just don't press the button that they see available on their tablet. But all of our restaurants who are within 5 kilometers of a recipient agency are automatically opted in, and they will automatically get that option to donate. I can talk a little bit about another factor of these community fridges. When the pandemic was first getting more serious in the US in March, we did see donations drop a little bit as restaurants had to pause and rethink their operations. And we also saw that a lot of our recipient agencies had to temporarily close, figure out how they were going to operate outside of quarantining, and in general, they just weren't allowed to be open to people coming in. So we did see a drop then, but even a couple of months later, we saw donations rise again as people adjusted to the way that they distribute food. There was more availability, and also due to the pandemic, there's been a much higher need. So I think a lot of places are really adjusting to how they operate and are making it possible to receive this food and redistribute it any way that they can. I do think that the community fridges really helped because of their 24/7 availability, and I think we added our first community fridge in this last spring. So it was something that also popped up as a response to so many food insecure people in people's communities. So since June, we've grown every month in the number of food donated and the number of deliveries that we've had through FoodFight. Currently, we're seeing about 700 to 800 deliveries every month. And of course, that varies in how much food each time, just depending on which restaurant is donating. Nonprofits, we do have lots of nonprofits that have signed up with us. Charities can sign up via a form on our website, foodfight.postmates.com. It's just a simple Google form, and we'll check to make sure that we have restaurants nearby their location and walk them through how the program works. So it's a free program for any nonprofit to sign up. And these are just a few examples that we've worked with recently. The Dream Center in LA, Project Return in Nashville, and Unidos Si Se Pueden in New York. So a lot of these nonprofits that we work with are handing out meals the day that they receive them. Because of the nature of these donations are from restaurants, we mostly see prepared meals and perishable foods. We don't see very much canned goods or boxed goods that would normally be at a pantry. So that is also another challenge for nonprofits or other agencies that are not nonprofits to work with us, is that they have to be able to accept and store non-perishable foods. Perishable foods. And then this is our current map. It's actually slightly outdated, but we're in 43 of 50 states. So we are trying to spread across the country, and we are still onboarding recipient agencies currently. So even if you are not a recipient agency yourself, you can send us suggestions, and we will reach out to them and see if they're interested in joining our program. That has been a really big focus for us, is just to extend our reach and then to also get restaurants to press the button more than the one time that they want to try it out. We would love to see more regular donations happening every week. We do have some restaurants that do donations on a weekly basis like that, but primarily we're seeing them happen less often. This is another program that we have that is kind of works in tandem with FoodFight and can be used to address the same issues. It's called our Nonprofit Delivery as a Service, or DOS program. And essentially this gives agencies access to our fleet of drivers. Some nonprofits already have set partnerships and they already know where their donations are coming, but it's once again that logistics piece that is the challenging part of moving food to people who really need it. So for nonprofit DOS, we give access to our fleet of drivers through a dashboard system, and essentially nonprofits can use this to request a delivery from a local Postmates driver to come, and they can schedule that in advance. They just have to enter the pickup and the drop-off location. And this is available throughout the country as well. And it is at a slight discount from our normal delivery as a service product that places like stores use to deliver their products. Just to clarify, nonprofit DOS, this is something that takes place outside of the normal Postmates app that you would use to order meals for yourself. This is just a sample of a nonprofit who used nonprofit DOS. This summer, Feed Hero Nurses was using this program to send meals from restaurants who were donating the meals to frontline workers at kind of odd hours. They focused on serving the night shift of nurses at hospitals that were hit really hard by COVID. So that's just a testimonial. They said, you know, it really helped them make it possible to fundraise and cover the cost of the deliveries, and then ensure that they're using someone who is also getting paid and is not only a volunteer who's volunteering their time. A question came in, can Postmates envision someday picking up farm surplus? That's a great question. The two things that stand out to me as challenges to that are farms are mostly in more rural areas, and we just don't have the network of drivers that we do in the city. So I think it would be a challenge to see if we have enough drivers who would want to go out to the farm and pick up and bring it back into a nearby place. And then the other thing is that our drivers are, for the most part, using normal cars. So it's not necessarily the type of, they don't necessarily have the same type of space like a van or a truck would to get really large amounts of surplus food. When we talk to our restaurants and give them guidelines for how they donate food, we typically say it has to fit in the back of a Prius. And if it's larger than that, then they have to call more than one driver. So with farm surplus, I can see that being an issue. I do think that that could work potentially with nonprofit DOS or just regular DOS for farms. But once again, it just really depends on if we have drivers available. All right, and this is just my last slide. This is just what we like to say when we are talking with restaurants. Good food isn't garbage, and together we can get this good food to those in need and fight to make food insecurity in our country a thing of the past. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Seriously, really great to see all of the work going in to make sure that food is not sent to the landfill and it's getting to those who need it. I don't see any more questions, but if you do still have questions, feel free to either push the raise your hand icon or send them through the chat. But I just wanted to thank all of our speakers again for taking the time to inform us on this important topic. And I'd also like to thank everyone that registered and was a part of our audience. So like I said, this is part 2 of a 4-part series. And so look out for the upcoming registration link for our webinars in February and March. Those will go out in January after the holidays. And like I said, the one in February will be on diversion of food waste. And then in March, we will focus on other food waste strategies. So also be on the lookout for an email that I will be sending next week with the recording and presentation slides. They will also be available on our YouTube channel if you just search Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices. If you do have any further questions, feel free to contact me. Here's my contact info. You can contact me by phone or by email. I'm fine with either, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So again, if there are no questions, thank you all so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.